For over 2,000 years, humanity has been obsessed with a specific kind of shadow. The kind that doesn't follow a man, but follows his money. In the records of the Roman Republic, there is a phrase that was whispered like a death sentence. Aurum Tolosanum habere, to possess the gold of Tolosa. To the citizens of Rome, it wasn't just a description of wealth, it was a curse, a warning that touching this gold meant absolute ruin. But this phrase didn't exist before 105 BC. Rome coined it afterward, to explain what happened when one man got too greedy. Because the treasure taken from the sacred lakes of Gaul was said to be guarded by a malicious, supernatural rage. A fortune born of blood, sacrificed to the gods, and ripped away by human greed. But if you strip away the ghost stories and look at the cold, hard logistics, a different reality emerges. The curse of Tolosa wasn't woven by ancient druids or angry gods. It was engineered by a rogue Roman general, covered up by a political elite, and paid for with the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers, in a disaster Rome retroactively blamed on sacrilege. Welcome back to Vellum. Today we break down the anatomy of Rome's greatest insider heist. To understand the crime, we have to look at the official alibi. The myth begins in the year 279 BC, at the sacred mountain slopes of Delphi, Greece. A massive coalition of Celtic tribes, known to the Romans as Gauls, launched a devastating invasion into the heart of the Greek world. Their primary target was the Temple of Apollo, the most sacred and wealthy sanctuary in the Mediterranean. Greek historians claimed that the gods defended themselves, unleashing a supernatural thunderstorm and a massive rockfall that crushed the invaders. But a secondary, darker rumor persisted across Europe. Later Roman-era sources claimed that one specific tribe, the Volcae Tectosages, actually breached the temple's inner sanctum during the chaos. They allegedly escaped with the core of the temple's treasury, a staggering hoard of sacred gold, heavily tainted by the sacrilege of its theft. The tribe carried this massive plunder thousands of miles back to their homeland in southern France, settling in the city of Tolosa. Knowing the gold was stolen from a god, their druids ordered it buried where no mortal could easily reach it, at the bottom of their sacred lakes. For over a century, this legend served as an explanation for why the lakes of Tolosa held such an obscene amount of wealth. But from a forensic and historical perspective, the math behind the Delphi story simply does not check out. Decades before the Gauls ever arrived in Greece, the temple at Delphi had already been thoroughly picked clean during the Third Sacred War to pay for mercenary armies. Furthermore, ancient geologists noted that the treasure found in Tolosa didn't match the refined quality of Greek temple gold. It was native, unrefined gold. The Volcae Tectosages didn't need to steal from Apollo. They were sitting on massive natural gold deposits and dominated the heavy trade routes between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. For generations, their people had mined their own lands, dedicating a percentage of every harvest and trade deal to their lake sanctuaries as a religious tax. By the time the late Roman Republic cast its greedy eyes toward southern France, the sacred lakes of Tolosa held a fortune that defied imagination. Modern estimates place the hoard at roughly 100,000 pounds of gold and over 110,000 pounds of silver. Enter the year 106 BC. The Roman Republic was locked in a brutal, panic-inducing war against migrating Germanic tribes. To secure the volatile region of Gaul, Rome dispatched a man of impeccable aristocratic bloodline, proconsul Quintus Servilius Caepio. Caepio was an aristocratic hardliner, a man who despised the lower classes and viewed military command as a tool to rebuild his family's declining political fortune. What happened next was not a military operation. It was a heist dressed in official armor. When the city of Tolosa revolted against its Roman garrison, Caepio didn't just put down the rebellion. He marched his legions to the Holy Lakes, ordered them drained, and began pulling up the immense Celtic treasure. Legally, every single ounce of this treasure belonged to the state treasury of Rome, meant to fund the desperate wars threatening the Republic's survival. But Caepio did something highly unusual with the logistics of the transport. He split the shipment. The 110,000 pounds of silver were put on a heavily guarded, highly public route, shipping out toward Rome with full military accountability. But the gold, the infinitely more valuable asset, was sent on a completely different route toward the port of Massilia, guarded by a strangely small detachment of soldiers. It never arrived. Somewhere along the isolated road to Marseille, a mysterious force struck. Bandits allegedly swept out of the wilderness, completely overwhelming the light Roman escort. The attack was calculated, absolute, and brutal. Every single Roman legionnaire assigned to guard the gold convoy was slaughtered. No survivors were left to give a report. When Roman scouts finally discovered the crime scene, the wagons were completely intact, but the crates had been picked entirely clean. 100,000 pounds of gold had vanished into thin air. When the news reached the capital, Caepio wept openly, blaming the disaster on local bandits and the ancient, convenient curse of the Gallic gods. To the highly superstitious Roman public, it made perfect sense. The Gold of Tolosa was alive with malice, destroying anyone who dared to touch it. But back in Rome, a few sharp legal minds began looking at the crime scene logistics, and they realized the supernatural story was covering up a massive fraud. Because the bandits who pulled off the heist had information that only one man in the entire empire could have given them. And in 105 BC, 60,000 Roman soldiers marched into a valley they should never have entered, because the man who sent them there still hadn't been held accountable. By the autumn of 105 BC, the rumors of Caepio's stolen gold were temporarily swallowed by a much larger nightmare. Ancient sources claimed hundreds of thousands of Germanic warriors were migrating directly toward the Roman border. To meet this existential threat, the Roman Senate dispatched a second army to reinforce proconsul Caepio at the town of Arausio. This second army was commanded by the newly elected consul Malleus Maximus, a man of demonstrated political ability, but critically, one born outside the Roman nobility. To a high-born aristocratic hardliner like Caepio, taking orders from a new man of lower social standing was a fate worse than death. Instead of combining their forces into a single impenetrable shield wall, Caepio deliberately split the Roman defense. He marched his legions across the river, pitching his camp closer to the advancing enemy, simply to deny his co-commander any shared glory. The Germanic tribes saw the division immediately. They didn't see an empire, they saw a fractured command structure waiting to break. On October 6, 105 BC, the Cimbri struck. Because Caepio refused to coordinate or form a unified line with Maximus, his forward legions were hit in complete isolation. The Roman lines didn't just bend, they shattered. Caepio's men were pushed backward toward the rushing waters of the Rhone River, with nowhere to run. Ancient sources record that up to 80,000 Roman soldiers and 40,000 camp followers were systematically slaughtered or drowned in a single afternoon. It was the worst military defeat Rome had suffered since the carnage of Cannae over a century prior. An entire generation of soldiers erased. To the grieving families back in Rome, the explanation for this unprecedented slaughter wasn't found in a tactical manual. It was divine retribution. The public believed the gods had brought down the entire army to punish the man who stole the gold of Tolosa. But the ultimate historical irony is that Caepio himself didn't die at Arausio. He was one of the very few elite officers to escape the meat grinder. While tens of thousands of his citizens died in the mud, the man who had ordered the gold convoy away under light guard managed to survive and ride back to safety. When Caepio returned to Rome, he expected his aristocratic connections to shield him from the fallout, just as they always had. But the loss of an entire army was too catastrophic to ignore. The Roman Senate, pressured by a furious and vengeful public, did something unprecedented. They stripped Caepio of his proconsular imperium, confiscated his entire property, and ancient sources claimed the financial fine exceeded 15,000 talents. He was officially cast into exile, banned from ever returning to Roman soil, destined to die disgraced in the distant city of Smyrna. On paper, justice had been served. The greedy general had lost everything, his name ruined, and his family bloodline seemingly broken by the curse. But if you follow the money trail left behind in the aristocratic ledgers of the late Republic, the story takes a sharp forensic turn. Because while Caepio was officially bankrupt, his descendants suddenly became the most obscenely wealthy dynasty in Rome. The 100,000 pounds of gold hadn't been lost to bandits on the road to Marseille. It had just been laundered. To find a missing fortune in the ancient world, you don't look for buried treasure chests. You look for anomalies in the accounting. When the Roman Republic stripped Caepio of his property in 104 BC, they thought they had drained his bloodline dry. But ancient asset forfeiture had a massive, systemic loophole. Roman law allowed a condemned citizen to transfer assets to their children before a formal conviction took place. Before Caepio ever stepped foot into his exile in Smyrna, his vast wealth had already shifted into the shadows of his family tree. The first stop for the stolen gold of Tolosa wasn't a vault, it was real estate. In the decades following the heist, the Servilius Caepione's family began quietly buying up massive tracts of Italian farmland. They converted highly liquid, untraceable gold bullion into respectable, legal, revenue-generating property. It was the classic laundering play, converting dirty cash into clean, legitimate equity. Caepio's son, Quintus Servilius Caepio the Younger, suddenly possessed the financial backing to launch a massive political career. He rose through the military ranks and secured the position of quaestor, one of Rome's most powerful financial administrators. The ultimate historical irony, the son of Rome's greatest bank robber was now in charge of the Republic's checkbook. But the true scale of the heist's multi-generational survival becomes clear when you look at Caepio's granddaughter. Her name was Servilia. History remembers her as the formidable mistress of Julius Caesar, and one of the most politically well-funded women in the ancient world. To secure her affection, Caesar famously gifted her a single black pearl worth 6 million sesterces, an astronomical sum. But modern forensic historians ask a simpler question. Where did her family get the leverage to command that kind of elite orbit? The ghost of the Gallic gold was quietly underwriting the entire late Republic. And in 44 BC, the money trail reached its bloody historical climax. But Servilius' son, widely believed to be the grandson of the man who stole the gold, was a young idealist named Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus was the co-architect of the conspiracy to assassinate Julius Caesar. To launch a coup against a dictator, you need more than just daggers and high ideals. You need capital. You need to pay legions, buy provisions, and fund a massive civil war across Greece and Macedonia. The private war chest of Brutus and Cassius was funded by the generational wealth of the Servilius estate. The army that marched to Philippi to defend the Roman Republic was paid for in part by the stolen gold of Tolosa. When Brutus fell on his own sword after his defeat, the fortune finally scattered into the wider Mediterranean economy. Today, modern composition testing of late Republican coinage shows a distinct signature. Some modern numismatists have noted a significant influx of high-purity, unrefined gold entering the Roman monetary system during precisely this era, consistent with the chemical profile of native Gallic deposits. The gold didn't vanish on a dirt road to Marseille. It just changed state. It built the villas, funded the dynasty, and bought the weapons that slew Caesar. The ancient Romans truly believed the gold of Tolosa carried a supernatural curse that brought ruin to anyone who touched it. But looking at the cold forensic data, the truth is far more dangerous. The gold didn't destroy Rome because it was cursed by the gods. It destroyed Rome because the system worked exactly the way the elite designed it to. When a historical mystery spans 2,000 years, narrative evidence isn't enough. To prove a crime of this scale, you need physical receipts. And the first receipt is written directly into the geology of France. The lakes of Tolosa described by ancient historians weren't deep volcanic craters. They were sacred, marshy wetlands, part of a massive network of glacial depressions unique to the Garonne River basin. When modern agricultural drainage and urban expansion reshaped Toulouse in the 1800s, laborers found exactly what the texts predicted. Massive deposits of ancient bullion didn't just exist in legend. They are sitting in museum vaults right now. In the fields surrounding ancient Tolosa, archaeologists have unearthed multiple ritual hoards containing tens of kilograms of high-purity gold. These findings confirm a critical truth. The local Celtic tribes possessed a staggering volume of liquid wealth that is consistent with Roman claims. But the most damning forensic data comes from trace element fingerprinting. Gold mined from different regions carries a unique atomic barcode based on its natural impurities. Native Gallic river gold features an exceptionally low platinum signature, but an incredibly high silver-to-copper ratio. When we test Roman coinage minted during the final decades of the Republic, this chemical profile appears in significant quantities, entering the monetary system decades before Caesar's Gallic conquests could explain it.
The wealth of Gaul didn't wait for Julius Caesar's conquests 50 years later. The capital injection began the moment Caepio came home.
This brings the case file into sharp, damning focus. The Gold of Tolosa was never a phantom myth used to explain a military disaster. It was a real, physical fortune that was violently extracted, systematically laundered, and deployed to reshape human history. The physical evidence was always there, in the hoards beneath French soil, in the coins of a dying republic, and in the accounting anomalies of a family that should have had nothing.
But the metal never lies.
The system left a footprint, and it's stamped in solid gold. Every forensic investigation eventually hits a wall built not of missing data, but of human motive. When we reconstruct a 2,000-year-old heist, we are entirely at the mercy of the people who wrote it down. And in the case of the Tolosa gold, our primary witnesses had massive political axes to grind. Take the sheer volume of the treasure: 15,000 talents of gold and silver. That number comes to us from the Greek geographer Strabo. But Strabo wasn't an accountant. He was writing over a century after the event. To the Roman elite of the late Republic, inflating the size of the stolen Gallic hoard served a highly specific purpose. The legend of an impossibly massive cursed treasure wasn't just a campfire story. It was a political weapon used to systematically destroy the reputation of the Servilii family. Roman politics was a blood sport played with rhetoric. By framing Caepio's military defeat at Arausio as divine retribution for robbing a temple, his political rivals successfully neutralized his entire faction. They didn't just want to convict him in a courtroom. They wanted to erase his family's right to rule. This is the ultimate challenge of forensic history. We have to cross-reference the highly biased, weaponized gossip of ancient politicians with the cold, unyielding reality of material data. The ancient texts tell us the gold brought a supernatural curse that ruined the Republic. But when you strip away the mythology and map the financial anomalies, a far more grounded reality emerges. The curse wasn't divine.
It was structural. The real story of Tolosa isn't that the gods punished a thief. It's that the theft was so massive and the laundering so successful that it permanently altered the economic fabric of the ancient world. We built Vellum to look past the myths, to challenge the narratives handed down by the victors, and to follow the physical trails left behind. Because the voices of the past will always try to spin the truth, but the metal never lies. The system left a footprint, and it's stamped in solid gold. The ancient world didn't have a monopoly on structural curses. Sometimes the pattern repeats in our own lifetime. A self-made billionaire, a multi-billion-euro empire built on raw stone, and a thousands of years old Celtic ring fort standing directly in the path of progress. In our next case file, we follow the numbers into the borderlands, where the metal never lies.